So as usual, something always goes wrong on the farm when you're knee-deep on a project. So this welding machine was overheating on me, and I'm pretty sure that it's the thermostat. Sometimes it can be the water pump or something else. But what I'm doing here is I turned the machine off, and then I started it back up after it cooled down, let it run for just a little bit, and then I'm feeling this hose right here just above the thermostat to see if the water ever starts to run through it. And that tells me whether or not the thermostat is actually working. You can see here in this picture, you get a good view on the left hand side, that's the water pump, and then where the little small hose is going through, that goes into the thermostat. So after I realized that the water was not coming through, then it was clear to me that the thermostat is most likely the problem. But I will show you a trick later on in the video to confirm whether or not the thermostat is the problem. But this hose that I'm taking loose right here, this is the hose that I'm feeling for. Now be careful when you do that, because obviously the fan is running there and you don't want to get your hand in there in that fan. So even though the water pump doesn't kick in to cycle the water coming from the engine, or letting water go down to the engine, don't let that fool you. There is still hot water that's going to come out of that hose. That thermostat is just to allow the water to start cycling through the engine once the block starts to heat up and get hotter. But it's still going to come out of there, and it, so you probably should let that cool down some, but this was cool enough that I could manage it. When you take this small little hose right here, when you take this loose, there are a couple of small ports on here, like right there where I'm pointing. Those are really easy to break off if you're not careful. I wouldn't say really easy to break off, but some of the older machines, it can be a little finicky. You can fix them, but the thing is that water pump that's on this machine, this is a 1969 red face, and that water pump is the same one all the way through the 80s and all like that. I'm pretty sure. Somebody in the comments correct me if I'm wrong, but that water pump is kind of difficult to, not terribly difficult to take off, but it's kind of difficult to find the new water pump in my experience. So just be really careful to break that, not to break that. And you see here, I'm demonstrating that my socket, my ratchet wouldn't quite work there. Now, if I would have put a long ratchet on there, it would have worked great. But this is perfect for my little small ratchet that I built. It's just like a little small headed ratchet that you can tell I can put a breaker bar or another ratchet on the end of it, and I can turn whatever angle I want. So it's kind of handy in tight spots. That's really an exaggerated place. I didn't have to have it there, but I just wanted to demonstrate it because I had it, and it's always handy to have. It's just kind of nice. But I made these a while back ago, and they've just been pretty useful to have in different little tight areas. It's kind of nice too, because you can still do it by hand as well. And I like this one right here more than any of them because it's a 1/2 inch, and I end up using this probably more than any of my other sockets or ratchets. I mean, I use it quite often with my breaker bar. I'll just lightly break it loose, and then I can just do it by hand with that. It's really handy when you're working on a car and you're in one of these newer cars and you're in a really tight spot too. So sometimes these can be kind of hard to get loose. It may look like I'm tapping this hard, but I'm really not. Just kind of lightly tapping it, wiggling it a little bit because it is actually moving, and then I'll tap it from other angles, but I'm really not hitting it that hard. You don't want to tear it up. It does have a gasket, a gasket underneath there. Usually you can save that gasket. So I just kind of try to be careful and get it loose. So I just kind of work it carefully until after it comes loose. So this little hose right here, I like to wait until after I've got this pulled off the block, and then I can work it off of the little hose fairly easily. You can get like these little channel locks that I've got, or you can sometimes just grab it and work it off. But you can tell, well, I actually cut off of it, but that's what I like to do, is I like to just get it off the block first. Now if you look down inside here, you can see the hole, the little small gap, and then there's a hole right there. It's kind of hard to see it, but you need to make sure when you, whatever you use, sometimes you'll find when you pull this off, that ring will be messed up. If you replace that ring or buy a new ring, you've got to make sure that that hole is still showing. Otherwise, you're not going to get water in your machine. You're going to end up blowing your engine. So you don't want to do that. It defeats the whole purpose, obviously. So that comes out pretty easily most of the time. It's hard to find a replacement for these. A lot of times they are rusted. This one right here, I've already built a new one. I've cut it out of an old piece of an exhaust pipe. A lot of times you can do that, find the right size exhaust pipe. It's just a spacer is all it is. Just like I said, make sure that you get that hose, that hole, make sure that hole is clear. But the thermostat comes right out pretty easily. There's nothing to it. I think it costs maybe 10 bucks. But this is how you test it if you want to know for sure. It's so cheap, I usually just do it anyway. But if you want to test it, throw it in a cup of hot water like this. I know that there's no steam coming out of this cup, so I know someone in the comments is going to say, well, it's not a hot cup, so you failed the test. So whatever you want to say, I don't care what you think. It really doesn't matter. So just test it out if you want to. Get a hot cup, throw it in there. But personally, for 10 bucks, I'm going to replace it every time I tear into it, because it doesn't cost that much, and it saves you a lot of time in the future. Make sure you clean it up good, obviously. Not a big deal. But all of that stuff does end up back in your engine if you don't keep it clean. So I like to keep it all cleaned up. You can tell how I put the new thermostat in. Make sure you got that lined up. Not hard to do. And all that does is keep that seated in there. If you do build one of these, it is important to make sure that you make that spacer to where it's exactly it's exactly flush. Like once you get it down tight, it is actually flush, because you don't want that thermostat moving around in there. And then it's just a matter of putting it all back together, pretty much like it came apart. It's not that big of a deal. 9 times out of 10, this is going to be your problem if you are overheating. If you're worried that there's another problem, your water pump can go out. There's what you call a weep hole underneath your water pump. If you look underneath there, you can, a lot of times you'll start to see it leaking water. You just look at the water pump and look right up underneath where the pulley is. And if you start to see water, a lot of times that will be an indication that the bearings are going out. A lot of that old school technology kind of just made life simple and easy. So keep your eyes open for that. But other than that, usually it's just going to be this $10 part. So as always, thanks for watching.